Chapter 2.2 is about linear relations and functions. This is where you start getting into more of the information that's on your test. As I said, yesterday's material or 2.1 isn't really part of your test, but it is important because you need to kind of know that to know about this. Today's lesson is mostly about coping with standard form equations. I don't know if you remember what standard form is, but standard form is whenever x and y are on one side and your constant is on the other. There is no real meaning for A and no real meaning for B outside of the fact that they're just the coefficients. But again, in standard form, it's usually x and y on the left, c on the right. The degree of a function is represented by the highest power of any variables in it. So if you're asking about what the degree is of this problem, what you're looking at here is x is going to the first power, so that's a degree of 1. The second term, y is going to the first power, so that's a degree of 1. 8, just so you know, a review, has no variables attached. That's actually a degree of 0 because it doesn't have any variables. And so out of this, the highest number is 1. You don't add them. You simply pick the highest number of the whatever terms are there. So in this case, when you're asking about the degree of this one, this has 2 x's because it's x squared, which means the degree of this is 2. This has 1x, which means it's a degree of 1. This has 1y, which means the degree is 1. And once again, you pick the highest number. The highest number is 2, so the degree of this would be 2. A linear function, by definition, can't have any variables higher than a degree of 1. So if they ask you if a degree, actually I'll just say the degree has to be 1 for every variable, as I'll point out in some of these weird ones. Y equals x squared minus 6. Not linear. The reason it's not linear is because of that. Some of you know that would look like a U shape, which we'll talk about probably pretty soon. I don't know when because I haven't looked ahead, but I know it's coming up. H of x equals 6. Now you'll say to yourself, well, I don't know what that means, but remember this is function notation and that this is simply a replacement for y. And so therefore y has a highest power of 1 and x isn't there, which means that yes, this is linear. This is not, this is. And actually y equals 6, which you'll learn is to graph y equals 6, you go on the y-axis to 6, and you extend that line across. That would be y equals 6. You might want to write that because I think it's part of your homework. X equals something. So let's say we're doing x equals negative 2. You would go on the x-axis to where negative 2 is at and extend that line. And that would be your x equals negative 2. So again, whenever they give you just a one variable graph of a line, that's how you graph that. C is not linear because this square root, you'll find out is definitely, pretty much it doesn't even look like it's linear because of this symbol. When you see symbols like that, it's not going to work. This is linear because that y is going to a degree of 1, x is a degree of 1, you have a constant. Actually, this is almost standard form except the x would be in front, but that's about it. All right. The x-intercept is the value that results when you substitute y equals 0 into the equation. So working with me here, and I'll show you the shortcut in just a second because there is a shortcut, but you have to make sure you study and know it. It's not something you can kind of know. It's something you have to absolutely know if you're going to use a shortcut. But first, watch this. If I plug y equals 0, it ends up being 4x plus 8 parentheses 0 equals 12. 4x plus, this turns into 0 equals 12. Therefore, 4x equals 12. And when you divide by 4, you end up with x equals 3. That is your x-intercept. Notice it says x-intercept, and I wanted my answer to be x equals. Common sense way to find x-intercept is just ignore the y term. So think about this for a second. If I know I'm going to put 0 in for y, with us being skilled in this stuff because we put in time, putting 0 in for y is going to make it turn into 0, which means it's just going to go away anyway, which means that any time you're asked for the x-intercept, I would just go straight to that point. Because what I would say is if I want the x-intercept, then y is not important. So I literally take it out of the equation and just write it and find my x-intercept. All right. Same way works with the y. Y-intercept is what happens when you plug in x equals 0. So if I did this the long way, I'd put 5 parentheses 0 minus 3y equals 15. That would turn to 0 minus 3y equals 15, which turns, because that goes away, into negative 3y equals 15, which you have to be careful. A lot of people forget that negative. And then when you divide by negative 3, you get y equals negative 5. And once again, the common sense way, if you want the y-intercept, just ignore the x. If I'm looking for what y is, I don't care about x, which means I just end up with that anyway. And so these two steps you can skip over if you practice it, and if you make sure that you know it, that is fine. All right. I usually use that, and I actually give you a lot of permission to use that, because as we're going further into this stuff, you want to use more common sense. You want to use efficient methods, because what happens is the longer it takes for you to do things that should be done decently quickly, the more stress you feel, because time is ticking. You understand that I can't give you extra time on your tests. All those things become a factor in everything, just kind of compounds. So when you're asked to graph this and it's in standard form, and we'll learn another way to graph. I don't know if it's tomorrow or whatnot, but whenever you're graphing these things here, what you're doing is you need 2 points to graph. Well, why not use the x-intercept and the y-intercept by doing something like this? If I want the x-intercept, I know I'm going to put 3x equals 12. I know that x is going to equal 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That is where it crosses the x-axis. When I want my y-intercept, now be careful, because people do this. But remember that the negative is not just there, it's actually part of the 4. This 4 is identified as a negative 4. And so therefore you would bring down negative 4y equals 12, which means that y is negative 3, not positive 3. And from there you would use your ruler or some sort of straight edge, which you could even use paper to do that, and connect those 2 points. All right, that's how easy it is. It's not hard to graph. The funny thing about graphing is that a lot of people teach it and make it really, really complex, but it's not nearly as tough as what it is. When you're graphing a line, and only a line, you only need 2 points. And so you use whatever strategy is best to get you 2 points. In this case, use the intercepts. Same thing here. Graph 2x minus y equals 4. So therefore what I'll do is ignore the y and put 2x equals 4, which means that x is 2, which means that that dot is here. Then I ignore the x, again, not covering up the negative, but just the x, and you end up with negative y equals 4, which means that y is negative 4. And then from there, you put all that together to get to where you are. And that's that. All right. Application problems is going to be showing up mainly because it's going to be on your SAT stuff and other higher level things, but it typically has 2 what we call variables, and variables you understand because I told you about the word each, per, and every, and how that changes. So if you were given a problem like this, somebody earns commission of $175 for each magazine and $150 for each newspaper. Her goal is to earn a total of $525 in commission in the next 2 weeks. Write an equation to model the situation. So what we're looking at is, you notice that you have each magazine, which means what I would do is put 1.75 M. That way I know what in the heck it is. I would not use a random X, because then I might have to plug something in and I need to know what it represents. And then it says, so she earns commission on this for each magazine, and she earns this much commission for each newspaper, so that works together. So 1.50 for each newspaper, so I would use N and set that equal to 525, because that's what she wants to make. So the commission of 175 per magazine, and which typically is what plus means, 150 per newspaper should equal 525. That's your equation. But again, the key thing is you have 2 words that's telling you you're going to have a variable, and so therefore that's how you know it's going to be standard form. If she sells 100 magazine subscriptions, how many newspaper subscriptions must she have to accomplish her goal? Well, that's where having your variable there. It says 100 magazine subscriptions, so we take 100 and plug it into here. Now, I will tell you, yes, we are using calculators, but I need for you to show me work. Don't just give me the answer. This work here is sufficient. If from there you want to go 175 plus 1, actually you still have to show me this part. There is no shortcut on this stuff because I need for you to be ready for the higher level stuff. If you again want to do the minus 175 here instead, because you know you're going to do minus 175, that's also good. So 350. And if you want to do your division without showing it, that is also fine. But notice how my work follows what's going on. So divided by 1.50, which is just 1.5, and it says 233.3. So here's the point, and this is where you have to use your common sense. You can't sell 0.3 subscriptions. And at 233, you're not at 350 yet, or you're not at 525 yet. So therefore, the answer is 234 subscriptions. So in the last chapter, we saw where the change didn't matter because we're talking about a ticket price, and that doesn't matter how close you get to the next ticket price, you have to stay down. In this one, once you get a decimal of 233, even if it was 233.1, you still haven't reached the goal, so therefore you still need 234. So the reason why I'm doing this is to make sure you learn that in some instances, when you can't have a fraction of an amount, you've got to think about it for a second and use your common sense. Sometimes you'll have to go down, sometimes you have to go up. It just depends on what the situation is. In this case, she wants to reach a goal of 525, which means that the whole number of 233 is not enough, so you have to move up to the next one. Outside of that, just make sure you're still make sure you're still doing what you need to do to keep up. Ask your questions and all that good stuff, and I will talk to you later. Have a good day.